All right, well, maybe I'll go ahead and start explaining the process, and then we'll dive in more deeply with the content of today's meeting. So, good morning. I'm Kathy Grenling. I am at Emory University, and I'm here today as part of my role as director of the Collaboration and Multidisciplinary Team Science section of our CTS, of the Georgia CTSA. So one thing we try to do is help connect people, help improve collaboration across different research groups. And one way that we've been successful in doing that in the past are these blue sky groups. So these are unstructured meetings. There's a little more structure today than usual because we have information we want to share with you. But the idea is that we'll talk about the field of virtual reality and artificial reality in healthcare. We'll talk about what are the known funding opportunities, what are the potential cross-institutional collaborative research opportunities, what are the burning questions in the field. In the second part of this, we'll ask you to tell us about what you're doing in this area and how you would like to find a collaborator or what you have to offer to a collaborator. So please be ready to share your experience, to learn from others, and hopefully enjoy some opportunities for some interdisciplinary networking. So I just also want to mention, can we move? Thank you. We have started to offer small collaborative pilot grants. These are very small grants, $1,500. So if you today identify a collaborator or a collaborative team, we'll offer you $1,500 to get that started, to help kick it off. So it might be transportation for a joint meeting somewhere or lunch for a meeting, but different ways that you can help launch that collaboration. Next slide. We also want to encourage you to join our CTSA Match. It's an online networking tool. So there's a QR code here that you can snap with your phone if you're interested in joining CTSA Match. As we build it, you'll find more and more potential collaborators. And it's a good way to put in what you're working on. And I find people across the 4 CTSA institutions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our speaker today, who's Barbara Rothbaum. She's a professor of psychiatry and the Associate Vice Chair of Clinical Research in Emory's Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. She's also the executive director of the Emory Healthcare Veterans Program and the Trauma and Anxiety Recovery Program. She has really pioneered the application of virtual reality to the treatment of psychological disorders. So we are very pleased that she's able to kick us off today. And Barbara, thank you for coming, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you for including me. And it's always fun to talk about virtual reality exposure therapy. My disclosures, and this is actually kind of interesting when you talk about collaborations, because we started this work, there was an Emory Georgia Tech seed grant. And so I started it with a computer scientist from Georgia Tech, and then it was popular, and Emory lawyers literally took us to a lawyer to incorporate, and that's Virtually Better. So that's my conflict of interest. I'm full-time at Emory, but I'm a part owner in Virtually Better, which is an Emory Georgia Tech startup. The virtual Iraq that I'll talk about today wasn't created by us. It was created by Dr. Skip Rizzo at USC, and Emory Healthcare Veterans Program is supported from a grant from the Wounded Warrior Project. So I'm going to mainly talk about treatment and using VR for treatment. In general, we use it as part of cognitive behavioral treatment, CBT. And in general, with CBT for anxiety, what we're doing is helping people confront what they're scared of, but in a therapeutic manner so that it changes, that it gets easier. This is the...
We will begin takeoff momentarily.
Virtual Airplane is actually my favorite of all the VR apps because I can exactly control the exposure to make the perfect exposure. If my patient's not ready for turbulence, I can guarantee there won't be turbulence. When my patient is ready for turbulence, I can guarantee there will be turbulence. We can take off and land as many times as we need to, all in my 1-hour therapy session without leaving my office. So I really love it. This is an earlier version of the virtual Iraq and Afghanistan. I'll show you the version that we're using now in a minute. We published the very first study published using VR to treat a psychological or psychiatric disorder. And we published it in 1995. So we've been doing this for a while. And we did it for the fear of heights, and it worked. And it was really a test balloon. Our line at the time was where we're on the cutting edge or the lunatic fringe. And this was the virtual elevator, a screenshot of it that we used at the time. It was modeled after the Marriott Marquis downtown. We created a new heights situation for some research that we did about 10 years later, the decycloserine. And then this is what our elevators look like now. And even if you're not scared of heights, if you've got on the head mount display and you're looking over this edge, your body is telling you, hang on to that railing, please. These were the original bridges that we used in that first study. One of our patients dubbed this bridge the Indiana Jones Bridge, and that stuck. These are what the bridges look like now. We've got VR for addictions. This is what our bar looks like now. You can order your favorite drink. We've used VR as a distraction during painful medical procedures for kids. And in that one, we had just used a very crude virtual gorilla exhibit, and it worked. Their heart rate was lower. The parents loved it, kids loved it, nurses loved it. This is what we use now. It's called Comcraft. And the child, you can see the green squiggly line at the bottom. That's their breathing. We put a strain gauge on them, and their breathing, we coach them in slow, regular breathing, and that's what powers this Comcraft. It's also kind of a game, and if their breathing gets too irregular or fast, the Comcraft goes to the bottom of the ocean floor and coaches them through calmer breathing again. This was our early virtual audience, and again, the therapist can control the audience's reaction, so we can have, I love this guy, very enthusiastic audience. We can have deadpan audience. We can have cell phones going off. We've just published a paper last year, I think. No, this year, 23, using the VR relaxation for chronic low back pain. And so pain decrease and medication usage decrease. And it's good to have non-opioid alternatives. Like I said, my favorite is the virtual airplane. Of course, we modeled the airport after the Atlanta airport, the busiest airport in the world. And just like on a regular airplane, most of what happens outside the window. We've done a number of studies, a number of controlled studies using it in this one. And actually, in one of the follow-ups, 90% of people had flown. So the blue are folks that got the virtual reality exposure therapy. The orange are folks that got standard exposure therapy. So we took them to the airport and used a real airplane. And then the green are waitlist control. So we just assess them at the same time points, but they don't get treatment in between. And like I said, in one of the other follow-up studies, at 1-year follow-up, 90% of people reported flying on a real airplane. And that's what matters. It doesn't matter if someone can get on a virtual airplane if they can't get on a real airplane. So it does translate. And SUDS is subjective units of discomfort. 0 to 100 is basically an anxiety thermometer. 0 indicates no anxiety, 100 indicates panic level anxiety. And you can see that it's about 30 to 40, so it's indicating manageable anxiety. Now go to PTSD. And I like VR for PTSD because it's a very potent stimulus. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a disorder of avoidance. People don't want to think about it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to do anything that reminds them of it. And that includes therapy. And it's really hard to avoid in the VR. The first time that we used it for PTSD was for Vietnam veterans. We did this at the end of the 90s, and we did find it helpful. And so what we do is imaginal exposure to their most traumatic memories, where we ask them to recount it out loud in the present tense repeatedly. And in the VR, the therapist is matching what the patient describes. We've used it for military sexual trauma, and we don't, before anybody cringes, we don't present the perpetrator. We just put them in a situation that reminds them of what happened, and then we, again, let them recount it. We like to look at more objective measures of PTSD, and in this study, this is one patient's psychophysiology. The top line, the green line, is EMG. That's the eye blink, the startle response. And on the left is pre-treatment, on the right is post-treatment. And then heart rate is in blue. These are our acoustic startle probes when we give them a sound, and this is skin conductance when your palms get sweaty. And you can see it with your naked eye that it decreases from pre-treatment to post-treatment. I mentioned the D-cycloserine, so that is an NMDA partial agonist. Don't get it confused with MDMA, because we're doing that research too. And my animal colleagues at Emory found that D-cycloserine facilitated the extinction of fear. And it was already FDA approved. It's an old tuberculosis drug. It's an old antibiotic. So we were able to use it in humans. And it was a really different paradigm. The drug does nothing, the way we're using it, does nothing in and of itself. It's only having it on board to facilitate the learning that occurs in the exposure therapy. So we wanted to underdose the exposure therapy. So we only gave them 2 sessions of exposure therapy, and they only got a dose of the drug before the exposure therapy. So they only got 2 doses of drug and 2 sessions. And we decided to use the VR because for the methodological control, it meant that we could exactly, like I said before, control the dose of exposure. And for an experiment, for a study, it meant that every single patient that participated got exactly the same exposure to heights for the same amount of time, and that they probably weren't going to be exposed to it outside of our experimental conditions. This doesn't do much for me, but if you're scared of heights and we ask you to walk across that catwalk, it gets people scared. Now we're looking at change in anxiety, and this is the placebo group. And you can see that they didn't change much, but we knew we were underdosing the exposure therapy, whereas the folks who got the D-cycloserine improved, their anxiety decreased significantly more. And remember, they only got 2 sessions. We assessed them at pre-treatment, post-treatment, and brought them back 3 months later. So this is 3 months later. And we found this on every single one of our measures, including that the group that got the D-cycloserine, DCS, had significantly more real world exposure to heights at 3 months. And again, that's what matters, that it translates. So now I'll go back to PTSD. And this is one of our head mount displays. When you're using VR, we put patients in a head mount display. It's basically kind of like a strappy helmet. It's got a television screen in front of each eye. It's got earphones, and it's got, you see the blue thing, the position tracker. So just as I move my head in reality and my view changes, so it does in virtual reality. We published this in 2014. And I thought you might want to see, this is how the therapist controls what the patient is seeing. It looks complicated, but it's really not quite as bad as it looks, because all of the scenes that we have to choose from are over on the right. And what we're going to do is, again, put them in a scene that matches what they've described. And we can match almost anything that they described from Iraq or Afghanistan. We can put them in an MRAP or a Humvee. We can change a time of day. We can put them whatever position they were in the vehicle, the driver, passenger, backseat, or turret if they were the gunner. We can have them at a checkpoint, at a FOB, forward operating base. They can be on foot patrol in the city. I think we have 3 mosques they can go in. We can medevac them out. We can change the time of day and the brightness. And this is just a little clip to show you some of the capabilities.
Drop the weapon. Range auto. Right there. Roger.
And I mean, again, this isn't what the patient's going to see. I'm just showing you
Bye.
basically a little movie to show you some of the capabilities. The patient's going to be seeing it in the head mount display, so they're going to be 100% immersed in this environment. And the therapist is only going to be presenting what the patient's describing. So we did a study with the VR and DCS, D-cycloserine, in post 9/11 veterans. We underdosed the exposure therapy, so they got 5 sessions total of the virtual reality exposure therapy, preceded by a pill, either D-cycloserine, pill placebo, or a drug that different mechanism of action. A lot of our patients like alprazolam, Xanax. And we were happy to see that overall their PTSD symptoms decreased with treatment and stayed lower 6 months later. So we also like the VR for assessment. So what we did, and we've been always looking for more objective measures of PTSD. So we created 3 2-minute standard VR clips, and we embed acoustic startle probes in those clips and in blue screens in between. So we use it for an activation paradigm. And you may not realize it, but every time you startle, you blink your eye. So we're able to measure that with electrodes, EMG. And startle reaction is one of the hallmark symptoms of PTSD. We also measure heart rate and skin conductance. So I was really happy to see that their startle response decreased with treatment and stayed lower 6 months later. We also looked at salivary cortisol during this time, before and after these VR assessment scenes. And as expected, from the start to right after these scenes to 15 minutes later, their cortisol increased. A lot of people think of cortisol as the stress hormone. And so that difference in the pre-treatment to 15 minutes later is what we're calling cortisol reactivity. And so we're seeing that the cortisol reactivity decreased with treatment and stayed lower 6 months later. So this makes me really happy, because I think people with PTSD, part of what makes them feel crazy is they can know they're not in a war zone, yet their bodies are feeling as if there's the same level of threat. And so seeing that their bodies are learning to become less reactive to these cues with treatment is a wonderful thing. We've just done a larger study. This is the one published last year. And in this one, for post 9/11 veterans and active duty service members that we recruited from Walter Reed, that everyone either got, and everything was randomly assigned, they either got the virtual reality exposure therapy or prolonged exposure therapy. And they all got a pill before each of the exposure therapy sessions, either the D-cycloserine or pill placebo. We entered 192 folks. They got a full dose, so 9 weeks of the virtual reality or PE exposure. And top line results. So the red is VR, the virtual reality exposure therapy. The blue is PE. You can see at baseline, after session 4, after session 6, and post-treatment. They were equally effective. And those with comorbid depression seem to benefit most from the VR. And this is that study. It gets a little at that slide. It looks a little more confusing. So again, the blue is PE, prolonged exposure. The red is virtual reality exposure, the VR. If it's a solid line, they have depression. If it's a dotted line, they just have PTSD and no depression. So the solid line is PTSD and depression. And then you can see that the virtual reality was more effective for depressed patients, but that the prolonged exposure was more effective for non-depressed patients. And we can get into some discussion. We're thinking maybe that since the VR is such a potent stimulus, that in some ways it may help rescue and engage depressed patients. So this was the largest randomized controlled trial of virtual reality in the PTSD literature. We also looked at genetics, not going to go into that today, but we found some genetic predictors. This is what our setup looks like at the Emory Healthcare Veterans Program. And so the patient's wearing a head mount display. They're sitting on this raised platform with a bass shaker, with a speaker underneath. And so they can feel the vibrations. You can feel the Humvee's engines on, you can feel explosions. The therapist is able to see everything on the monitors that the patient's seeing in the head-mounted display, so we can comment appropriately. Some of the advantages of virtual reality, as we've mentioned, we've got complete control over the stimuli that it's hard to do in real life, to create the perfect exposure for a patient at any given time. I love the feasibility. Like I said, you don't have to go to the airport and fly. That's going to take all day. Insurance isn't going to cover it. It's expensive. I can do all of that in my 1-hour therapy session in my office. In research, like I said, it offers that methodological control, that rigor. And in this case, that every participant received exactly the same stimuli at exactly the same dose with no exposure outside the experimental sessions. We think that that might be increased engagement because it is a potent stimuli. I thought you might find this fun. I've been doing this a long time, and I have amassed a head-mounted display collection that's, my own little Smithsonian here. If anybody wants to refer a post 9/11 veteran to us, everything is at no cost to the veteran. We can fly people in from all over the United States, put them up at a hotel, feed them, and give them more therapy in 2 weeks than most people get in a year. So please refer them. And with that, I'll stop sharing and kick it back to you, Kathy, or if people have questions or comments.
Thanks. Yes, maybe we'll just take a minute or two to see if there are any burning questions about what you presented, and we'll have a broader discussion later. Any comments? Anybody would like to make one comment in the chat about the biometrics, which are pretty cool?
Let me see. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we like trying to look at more objective measures if we can.
Great. So Kathy, maybe I could introduce our next speaker and introduce myself real quick. So hi, this is Wilbur Lamb from Emory University and Georgia Tech. I'm a professor of pediatrics and biomedical engineering at Emory and Georgia Tech. I'm also a pediatric hematologist oncologist at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and I'm the Associate Dean of Innovation. And one of the whole reasons we brought to this Blue Sky event is because we do, within our CTSA, specifically in the Emory HSRB2 building, we have a brand new VR XR facility, and we'd love to get input from experts like Dr. Rothbaum and even this audience about what we can do. We're just launching it, and I'd love to introduce Morgan Greenleaf and Santiago Arconada Alvarez to talk more about the facility. They're heading this up. So Santiago, you want to go ahead? Thank you.
Well, I'll actually start here. Apologies, I'm still getting over a cold. So my name is Morgan Greenleaf. I'm the scientific director of the Extended Reality, or XR, Innovation Center, which is the space that we're talking about here. And this is the actual space. I'm actually sitting in it right now. You can see it on the right there of the screen. It is an empty black box currently, although you don't need much for virtual reality spaces. And then on the left is a virtual reality version of the same physical space. And just because it's fun, our XR Innovation Center was born out of the what's called the App Hatchery, which is a digital health mobile app development and design group that Santiago and I both co-direct. And you can see some of the apps we've created on the wall as virtual posters there, which is fun. You can go to the next, Iago. So the XR space is based in HSRB2, Health Science Research Building 2, which is the new building on the Emory campus. This is the beautiful atrium. And you can see our door there is on the left. So if you are in that building and you want to come say hello or come stop by, you're welcome to do so. We're here all the time. Go to the next. So Dr. Rothbaum talked a lot about virtual reality, and we call our center XR, or extended reality. And just to sort of set where that comes from, you can see this continuum of different kinds of augmented experiences. So on the left is the real stuff you see out of your eyes, the real environment. And then moving to the right, you have augmented reality. So this is where you're seeing mostly the real world, and then digital things are placed on your screen, usually through a pair of glasses. And then there's augmented virtuality, which is when you're looking at mostly a digital scene, but then you're doing the reverse. You're placing some real elements from the real world into that scene. And then finally, full immersion, so virtual reality. And our center is meant to encompass this whole range of extended reality, or XR. Go to the next. So I won't go delve into this too much, but just to say that there's been a ton of work in this space already, and we think there's even more opportunity, particularly as the hardware gets better and better each and every year, with big companies like Meta pushing consumer-based virtual reality. So we're working on projects related to pain management, also medical training. There's also home-based first aid training. And then outside of actual healthcare, there's also just health research-based applications of VR. For example, this is a product around data visualization. You can go to the next, Iago. So I'll pause here and turn it over to Santiago, and also please introduce yourself, Iago, since I neglected to give you space to do that.
It's all good. Thanks, Morgan. Yeah, I'm Santiago Canada Alvarez. I'm the technical director of the XR facility. And just to do a little bit of extra history about the App Hatchery, so we're part of the CTSA, which is the institution that's hosting this lovely event with Lorraine leading the efforts. And just to say more about what we do is we offer consulting and also development support for a lot of like software products. So we've built different mobile apps, websites to support clinical trials, also commercialization ventures, or even studies that are meant to like support like preliminary data for an R01. So we're like this group, Wilbur, Morgan, and myself, that you can talk to us, and we'll figure out if we need like any testing, any like extra development, any design. So everything we do is user-centered design, which basically involves like understanding what the users really are looking for in your application. So if you're doing a project, let's say on communication in the hospital, so how do patients with language proficiency communicate with nurses that speak English, and then the patient doesn't speak English? So the researcher may come in and say, we're trying to create this product, but we don't have the technical expertise. So we will come in and then do this whole process of understanding the user, talking to them, understanding the stakeholders, and creating this whole pipeline to come up with a product. So that we've done that for mobile apps and websites a lot. And then now we're taking this take on XR, so this new equipment, new technology, and what can we do, to leverage this and bring it into Emory. So some of the things we do in the space is things like concept testing, so consulting, talking to you, seeing out, understanding what you need. And we also have a lot of equipment, so headsets, computers, things that can run a lot of VR. And I really like that Dr. Rothbaum showed like what it was back then and what it is now, because the technology has really increased since the 90s. And actually the VR has been around since the 60s. And it has improved a lot, and not only in terms of graphics and this experience you have seen, but also on the wearable piece and on how this looks like. And I'm showing here one of the state of the art of this technology, which is the Meta Quest Pro. As you all know, Meta, back then Facebook, has really invested a lot of money on this. So they're one of the major players like pushing the technology and the market. And this is actually like one generation behind. Now they have the Quest 3, but we have a couple of these that you can use in the facility and just try and see how this feels like for you. As I said before, we also do design and development support, so we can help you or even just do the full design of the experience and also a bit of development. And a couple extra things to say, which is as Morgan said, there's a lot of already in the space. So you don't always have to recreate the wheel, but rather like you can go to like an external vendor, an external company that has created an experience that you can leverage, and we can facilitate that liaison with them. So, we can be the front on your conversation with this company that may be developing VR. So we can handle that for you, as well as supporting you in like clinical study execution through the space that you have seen already. And some of our current projects. So we've been around for a few, like around half a year, still on the launching phase. We have a couple of projects on the left, one on implicit bias. So one of the things the VR can do is give you a new skin, a new body, so you can experience things from a different perspective. And we're doing this with Michelle Samler from the Department of Anesthesiology on training for bias in the operating room. And on the right, we have a more like meta project where we're doing microprevention through XR, so understanding the impact of these technologies into the human eye and evaluating a possibility to use them for prevention. So one question probably everybody has is, this sounds like a lot, very expensive, like how do I do this? So we have the same motto as with the Apache. Consultations are free, so email us, talk to us anytime about whatever stage you're on. If you're like having an idea, or you're like already at the finish line, and you can always talk to us and we'll adapt to what you need. And if we see there's an opportunity for collaboration or synergy, we'll figure out the cost according to the scope of the project and what you'll need. And we're on a lovely building. If you haven't been, it's amazing. We're on the first floor, very readily accessible up there in that photograph Morgan showed. And you can email us at any time and we'll get set up. Right, back to you, Kathy.
Thanks so much. So it's a really great resource for those of you, presumably everyone on this call interested in AR and VR. So what we'd like to do now is transition a bit to what you're interested in. So for this part, if you feel comfortable and you could put on your videos, we know who we're talking to, that would be great. So what I'm going to do is call on you in the order I see you on my screen and ask you to tell us your interest in this area, what you're looking for in terms of new collaborations and what you might bring to a collaboration. And if you've heard something by a previous speaker that you're interested in following up on, please tell us that as well. So I'm just going to start, and Kyle Johnson, you are up first.
Lucky me.
Yes.
Well, first I want to say it's a pleasure to actually see you and interact with you, Barbara. I am a professor at University of Georgia, but I did my training under Ben Locke, who did a postdoc under Larry Hodges. And the first thing he ever showed us in the VR class back, and I guess this would be 2005 for me, was your work, that you showed earlier today. So it is really a privilege. So yeah, I'm a professor in electrical and computer engineering. I've been doing virtual reality since around that time, 2005 or so. I'm really a developer, so I work with all the technology, AR and VR, and been doing medical since my grad school days. I've actually recently started doing it again, starting to work with some colleagues at an orthopedic institute, helping people try to recover from limb loss and adapt to prosthetics.
Thank you. Dan Drain. You're muted, Dan.
Yes, I'm a neuropsychologist in the Epilepsy Center. I've studied neurocircuitry before and after surgery with cognitive testing, electrophysiology, and neuroimaging. And again, yeah, thank you for your work, Dr. Rothbaum. I'm very familiar with what you're doing. I think it's excellent. I love to see the use of technology. I think that's moving along well. And I was unaware that we had a center, so that's good news too. My interest, I'm trying to build tasks for assessing cognitive function in a more rich way. I have a partnership with a company called Spin VFX, which is it's a movie special effect company. So we're trying to make like very realistic looking models of things. And so for example, right now in the world of of epilepsy surgery, our standard paper and pencil test, and if memory is a big circle, we're testing a little tiny component of it. And so there are a ton of things that aren't getting tested. One of these things is people's emotional reaction to stimuli and how that affects what you remember. So if something scares you, you remember it usually better than you don't, than something that doesn't scare you. However, with our epilepsy patients, when we ablate the hippocampus or the amygdala, they don't have, some of them lose their emotional reactivity altogether. And so this is hurting their memory because nothing's salient to them. And so I need stimuli that I can create, like you talked about, Dr. Rothbaum, different levels of emotional tone and be able to study that. We don't have any way to study people over time. So we've been building tasks that we can show you. We've built these little video clips that people can watch where it's a very real world setting. And then we can deliver it over Zoom a week later. And I've partnered with Emily Wall and some of the computer science people to build out things that we can do. So that's, I won't go on and on because there's lots on here, but we've got some resources with, with this special effects company. We're dabbling in, we've got virtual headsets and things that we're using here, but I'd love to come over and see the center and maybe, did you say there's a place we can put like what we're doing? Because, probably a lot of us are doing various things. And if we share it together, I think we could probably find ways to collaborate. And, one of us may have something that somebody else needs. And so that's what I would like to see come out of it, is just being able to have some other people that want to work in the same space.
Well, Wilbur, Morgan, you want to comment on that?
Sure. I mean, the basic thing is you could drop links to your resources in the chat here. We'll of course capture them and maybe send them out as a summary to this entire group. And of course, you're welcome to come visit our space and chat with us.
Yeah, and just to double down on what Morgan said, Daniel, and for all of you, this is exactly why we're doing this Blue Sky. We want to start to generate a community in this space. I don't think there is one, but now that we have the space, we can use it as a physical nidus and symbolic kind of center point for all of this. So we love this. And so please do, Daniel, and we'd love to meet with you.
Also, I just wanted to mention, when everybody registered, you did indicate your research interest in this field. We will definitely make sure to go ahead and send that out to everybody. And if you do want to add anything to that or change it, just send me a quick email and we can do that as well.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, Salwen Liao.
All right, I unmuted myself. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, I am an assistant professor in the School of Psychology at Georgia Tech, and I'm relatively new. I joined just 3 years ago. So I'm studying autobiographical memory, so personal memories of things that happened in our past. And I obtained a small seed grant from our university, basically, and I created my first very basic virtual reality app, and I call it like Recalling Youth. And I want to leverage the VR technology, try to enhance potentially vividness or event specific, more specific detailed recollection of memory in older people with and without cognitive impairment. So I'm very happy that I see this group of people, because I'm currently working, collaborating with a research scientist at IPAD. I think that's called Institute for People and Technology. But that's only one engineer. He is working with me. But I think probably I will probably visit you to discuss some of the ideas to scale up some of the research projects that I'm currently working on. Yeah.
Great. Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle LaPlaca. I'm professor in biomedical engineering at Emory and Georgia Tech, Wilbur. And I've been working in this space for about 20 years. So before all the off-the-shelf headsets, my collaborator is David Wright in emergency medicine, and we designed a neuropsych testing suite in collaboration with Felicia Goldstein, who some of you may know. And we designed our own hardware and software. We worked with GTRI, and we have since moved to off-the-shelf units, and we're in the process of trying to upgrade to the integrated headsets. And we've added multimodal data. So the area that we're targeting is concussion and related neurological deficits over time for both assessment as well as clinical management. And we have since been working with a vestibular neurologist, Rusty Gore, who was at Emory before he was at the Shepherd Center. And we've added some non-postural balance tasks to our cognitive suite, as well as target tracking without cameras. So it's more of a gaze task and reaction time. And we're in the process of actually working with Virtually Better to submit an STTR. And all the IP is at Georgia Tech and Emory, but we're very interested in commercializing the product as well as expanding our research capabilities, because essentially we're measuring a neurological function across different domains. So there's applicability for MCI and several other areas. So I'm looking for collaborators as well as technical expertise in the area. So I'm very pleased to hear about the App Hatchery. I had heard about it, but didn't know the details as far as the XR suite and just all of those related areas. So yeah, that's about it for now. But I'm anxious to hear what others have to say, because it's really interesting. There's so much interest here.
Yep, thank you, Michelle. Yun Wang. Yun, are you with us? We'll come back to you then. Yasemin Galami. We cannot hear you. I just barely.
No, can you hear me now?
A little bit better. If you can put it up any more, that would be great.
Yeah, I will try to talk louder. So I'm Yasemin. I go with Yasmin, and I'm a third year PhD student in architecture in Georgia Tech. In design, like my major is design for health, and my minor is human computer interaction. And I'm working on like how our physical environment affect our experience while we are using VR, like the level of visual exposure, privacy, acoustic, all of the like our environmental, variables affect our experience while we are using VR. And I've been working on with Emory University on CP Cognitive Empowerment Program for 2.5 years, and I really would like to continue on this, like how we can use like virtual reality for telehealth, and how our physical environment will support the use of telehealth either for the health provider or patient or whoever involved in telehealth. And I'm really happy to meet all of you here.
Before we go on, I just would ask some of the clinicians in the group to comment on that, on potential for use in telehealth. What do you see as possibilities there? So I guess I'm talking to Barbara and Wilbur and Daniel.
Yeah, I think the way we've been doing it, we haven't been able to do it yet, but with some of the new head-mounted displays that can wholly contain everything, then I think that's possible. There are also some apps that people are working on that you can download the content from the web. It would mean that the patient would need to have the head-mounted display where they are. And so there are some companies doing that, and there are people doing that with patients. But then it also means either the patient has to buy it, pay for it, or you take a risk of losing it. So, I mean, I think it's totally doable. We just hadn't figured it out easily yet.
Any other comments from other clinicians?
we haven't actually used virtual reality over telehealth yet, but we've used like some of our 2D stuff we've made, and we're working with we use a lot of freeware like Unity, the game engine, and there's the Whisper technology. So we can record the person, and we can use AI to transcribe what they're saying, and it'll pull out like emotional words or score it in different ways. So we're using AI for scoring and things. We've had the same problem. We probably would have to we've talked about maybe sending a headset or something, but then you risk losing equipment or damaging equipment and things like that. We can do some eye tracking and some things like that.
I've had a lot of experience sending out headsets, and I've been really surprised at one, how adept people are at setting these up at home. These are, MetaQuest headsets. They work really well. We have never lost one, and I've sent out 50, 60 of them for fairly long periods. And you give them a box, they send them back. It's all relatively clean. And so I've been pleasantly surprised at just how well that works.
Good to know. Wilbur.
Yeah, I think it's a great area for research. And in telehealth right now, there is a big push to get physical objects, to the patient side. And there's logistics companies that are entering telehealth. There's telehealth companies becoming logistics companies. So I think this is a neat project, and the timing is good, especially post-COVID, when telehealth is really getting a new spotlight on, how to move forward. So I think VR could actually have a new niche within telehealth, and we could be one of the places that actually study this.
Okay, great. Let's move on. Tracy.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Tracy Graham. I'm with the School of Nursing Center for Data Science. I'm relatively new to the center as their Associate Director for Operations and Research Projects. I'm here just to really learn. I'm still in the information gathering stage and just trying to find out what things are out there, what's going on in the community, to be able to direct our members, our faculty, and students to different resources. But we also have resources here at the center where we have groups that work with large language models and machine learning, and also database management. And my video did not turn on, sorry. So just here to learn, and also let you all know that the School of Nursing Center for Data Science has those resources available to collaborators.
Okay, thanks so much. Matthew.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Matthew Schmidt. I'm an associate professor at the University of Georgia, and I'm in a split position between the College of Education and the College of Pharmacy. I have been doing work in virtual reality for 2 decades now. My work centers around the use of virtual reality to provide therapy and training for autistic people, ranging from children all the way to adults. And I've built a number of interventions centering around life skills, social skills, and now my work has moved more towards incorporating participatory and co-design approaches, working with the autistic community to build interventions that work for them and kind of meet their preferences and needs and values. I've also worked with epilepsy populations, traumatic brain injury, and a number of other neurodevelopmental conditions, and done a lot of work with biometrics, which is why I thought it was pretty cool that we got to see some biometrics being used to get some objective measures out there. I'm new at the University of Georgia. I'm coming there from the Institute of Advanced Learning Technologies at the University of Florida, where I also worked with Ben Locke briefly. So yeah, that's what I do.
Thanks. Just a question about the co-design approaches that you're working on. What have you learned from your participants that has changed the way you do things?
Yeah, I think the first kind of obvious or aha moment, depending on how you look at it, is that nearly all research that's been done in this space has been done by non-autistic users or by people who have no neurodevelopmental conditions at all. And so you have kind of a situation where neurotypical people are mapping their own beliefs, values, preferences, etc., onto the behaviors of autistic people and other neurodiverse communities, which is seen more and more as a problematic stance. So I think that's the first thing that I would probably point to. The next thing that I would point to is that in terms of seeing the use of extended reality as a assistive technology, one of the issues with assistive technologies is abandonment. And abandonment tends to happen because value is not perceived. One of the things that we have seen is that by including the autistic community, the perceptions of value are increased tremendously.
It's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Samir. You with us, Samir? Okay, we'll come back to Samir. Jürgen?
Hello, hi, my name is Jürgen Pabel. I go by JP. I'm the odd one in the basket because I'm a alumni from Georgia Tech in computer science in 2001. And I'm German, I live in Germany, and I just came back to campus just to visit and stroll around, and I took a look at the campus calendar, saw this event, and just registered. So my profession is IT security, so I really can't contribute to anything that you've talked about, but it was really interesting listening in.
Well, thank you. If you think of a way to use virtual reality and IT security, let us know.
I will. I have to think about that.
Okay, thanks very much. Alyssa?
I'm an Emory Neuroscience PhD student working with Jennifer Stevens at the Grady Trauma Project. I study neural correlates in civilian PTSD, mainly utilizing neuroimaging to look at fear learning. So moving forward in my career, I'm really interested in expanding my work into virtual reality with the end goal of utilizing it to study memory and fear learning, as well as potentially being involved in the therapeutic world. And I'm really excited to hear on this Zoom about how so many researchers and clinicians are implementing this technology. So just to put in a plug for myself, I'm defending in the spring. I'm currently looking for postdocs, if that's of interest to anyone. Thanks.
That's great. And if you get a postdoc through somebody with this group, let us know, because that would be a great outcome. Lee Zhang. Go ahead, Lee.
Hello. You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Lee Zhang. So I'm a assistant professor of software engineering and game development from Kennesaw State University. So I happened to receive the email about this event. So I'm very interested in the application of virtual reality in the healthcare area. Personally, I'm very interested in using the VR for a particular group of people, that's the pediatric cancer patients and also their families. So I'm very interested in using how can we use VR, AR, the technology to provide support for those group of people. For example, for the patient education, rehabilitation from the cancer treatment, and also family support. So one project I'm really interested and also just get started with that is how to use VR to support the bereaved parents who lost their children from the cancer. Also because of some of my personal experience, I attend some of their events for the bereaved parents. So I work with some people from the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So they have a lot of events for those support those parents. So I found that a lot of therapeutic activities they did that works very well, such as the sharing of the stories in the physical space. But it just didn't work well in the online teleconference, that kind of setting. Because in the past couple of years, we have the pandemic. So a lot of events, they have to be held just online, but doesn't work very well. And also, I think that virtual reality may be a good tool that can provide maybe better experience for those therapeutic grief techniques. Because I found that really interesting is that the VR can put us in a kind of completely immersive virtual space, which is different from the traditional online like a meeting, which looks at that kind of screen looks like a barrier, but the VR can just put us directly into that kind of immersive space. So the project I'm just working on is to design a kind of a system like a networked multi-user VR system to support the story sharing from the bereaved parents. So I want the system to be very robust and provide them with a lot of tools for their sharing of the stories. And the future goal is to make the system kind of specifically for the bereaved parents, to create a specific virtual space for them to build the digital memories, to share digital memories, or to help them to continue to build the digital presence of their lost children. So I'm here and just looking for anybody collaborators who's interested in building a kind of shared VR multi-user VR system, which can be used for such kind of mental health therapeutic purposes.
I think that's an interesting twist on it. It makes me think, so we used to do these blue sky groups in person. It's harder to do them via Zoom. So maybe we need virtual reality for blue sky groups in the future.
Yeah, so if you do that kind of event in the Zoom, you feel that this is a kind of screen, just like a barrier between you, especially for sharing stories. A lot of users just turn off, especially for those bereaved parents, they just turn off their screen. You won't see their faces and they hide the emotions. But in VR, we have avatars. We have some high-end headset has the facial tracking, eye tracking, so we can use the avatars at the same time to provide to protect the privacy, but also can show there's some possible emotions. That'll be good for sharing stories.
I think you have some expertise in that here, as we've talked about. So we just have a couple of more people and then we'll open up for a more general discussion. So I want to come back to Yoon and Samir, if either one of you are back on and you'd like to share. Okay, and Terry joined us. Terry, would you like to tell us about your work in this space? Okay.
Hi.
There we go. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Terry Yarbrough, and I work with end of life and palliative care. And I've been creating VR experiences and working in conjunction with Savannah Hospice, Hospice of Savannah, and the Stewart Center for Palliative Care. And we're in the middle of a IRB working with stage 4 cancer patients and doing VR sessions multiple times a week with patients to see how much relief people are getting from VR. A lot of it is pain relief, a lot of it is anxiety reduction. And I've been a speaker at VMed 2023 and VMed 2022 at Cedar-Sinai over the last couple of years. So I'm pretty excited about this work.
It fits well with what this group's been discussing. Thanks. Karen, Lindsay, and Mackenzie Ritter, I know you're here for other purposes, but is there anything you would like to add to the discussion at this point?
Hi, I'm Karen Lindsley, and I'm with the Georgia CTSA. And my role there is twofold. One is regulatory, to help researchers navigate the regulatory pathways. And then number two, coordinating center. So the reason I was really interested in this group is so many times I have young, super bright, new professors looking for partners, or for instance, they might be from, I've had several from Kennesaw and Mercer, and they're looking for partners in medical centers to partner with for the clinical part. So my role is as a matchmaker, helping people find a partner, and then navigating, especially if you're on the technical side, how do you navigate the gap between technical interventions and then testing these in people and getting that through the regulatory process. So that's why there's a good match between my regulatory background and the coordinating center. And our work is for free. We're NIH supported. So we match make, we help get you through regulatory processes. And we're primarily in Georgia Tech, UGA, Morehouse, and Emory. But so many times the grant calls now really want multi-institutional PIs and leaders. And so that is another area that we can really help, is find you partners in different organizations so that your grant goes up a notch. So thank you.
Oh, and I think the CTSA match program that we showed you at the beginning will be helpful for you too. Mackenzie, did you want to say anything?
So I am also from a CTSA, but I am affiliated with Case Western Reserve, so part of the Northern Ohio CTSA. So I'm actually sitting in because we are thinking of starting a program similar to this. So just seeing how this is run.
Okay, I knew that, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk if you wanted to. So you've heard a lot now about a lot of different, what strikes me is that most of the VR applications I've heard about are for neuropsychological uses, except the one we heard about with orthopedics. And so is that an opportunity in this space to move a little bit outside of more neuropsychological things? I'm just throwing that out. As someone not in this space, I'm asking that question.
I can comment on that application a little bit, and I actually do think it's connected because one of the big application areas would be phantom limb pain and trying to sort of reduce that or address that. And so it is actually still connected to sort of pain management in a sense, but then there's also a really cool aspect of training. And so it's sort of connecting two of the strengths of virtual reality. I'm just getting started with the project, but hoping to get some seed funding for it soon.
Comments from anyone else on that question? What do you see the big opportunities for?
Kathy, I'll comment just a little bit. I don't know that I would call them opportunities. I would just say, as we've been setting up our center, the two other areas that seem that we're not really represented here that seem like there's a lot of applications is in training, so simulation training, particularly for surgery. That is a hot topic, so really education. And then the other, which I'd say there's a lot of buzz around, but I don't know that much is actually happening clinically, is also in surgery, which is particularly augmented reality related to surgery. So seeing images that have been taken by other equipment and then overlaid over the patient's body to aid surgery or to aid some other diagnostic procedures.
To echo that latter point, I didn't mention it, but one of the things that I would like to do, besides mapping out function and having better tasks to do it. Our goal is to make a 3D, virtual map of the brain. As we could, so when I do tumor mapping, I could, if the patient's not cooperative, we could overlay a map for language or memory. The surgeon could have it in 3D space and see what functions are there. And part of this would come through, we're doing passive and stimulation mapping of the brain as well. And so I could see at some point having the ability to for a surgeon to pull up a map to know what functions should be in a certain area, and then be able to maybe focus the testing around that if you are going to do stimulation and things like that. So I think there's a lot of applications there, as well as to create things that are in vivo. We're trying to find a way to shut down the brain. So to think of the old WADA test with a chemical, we're trying to use temporally interfering electrical fields or focused ultrasound to turn off a part of your brain, whatever the surgeon's going to take out, let's say. So, because we can, as a neuropsychologist, we can tell the patient they may lose some function. And a lot of times they'll say, oh, that's fine, I don't really read much or whatever. And then after they lose their ability to read, they're very upset. And so my goal is to be able to create this in vivo so that we could shut your brain off or shut a piece of it off for an hour or a day and let you see what it's like. So that would be another thing that I think would be kind of cool.
That's a really interesting application. Other comments on that? Because we have 3 people who have joined us now who could share what they're doing. And I also want to call your attention to the chat where Kyle had put some notes about students, which I think is also a great way to collaborate with each other. Yoon, you're here now. Do you want to comment on what you're doing?
Sorry, I was muted in another meeting. I'm sorry about that, but I'm interested in this workshop. Will be a new faculty. I'm interested in the VR AR application in the maternal health. That's why I kind of, even before I joined, want to hear like the community here about the AR VR development thing. So,
all right, thanks.
Yeah, I'm actually very interested in connecting with Barbara, and hopefully I meet you at SMP soon. Yeah.
Great. Srijana, do you want to comment? And how about Valentina? Would you like to tell us about what you're doing?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm in Kennesaw State University. We're now incorporating VR in design of spaces with architecture and nursing and industrial engineering all together. So how to design better spaces where the activities for nurses, surgeons, or other staff in hospitals will be better for them. We evaluate the design of the space, the workstations, the hallways, and then we put it in that environment and see what they think about it. Is they gonna think that they're gonna perform better? And as an industrial engineer, I'm part of the group, and what I do is evaluate the performance of them in terms of ergonomics and see if they change their postures or the way that they perform the activities just because of the design of the space.
Thanks. We had a PhD graduate. Yasmin is a PhD graduate student in architecture. Might be someone to connect with. Michelle jumped off, but she added something to the chat about her interest in pediatric emergency medicine. So in our last few minutes, I'm just going to ask the group, where is this field going? Where are the opportunities to be really cutting edge in this field? I feel like we've heard a lot of cutting edge work that's going on now, but are there areas that we haven't discussed that we should be thinking about?
If I may, I would like to share my limited experience and hope that after this meeting, I am more convinced by using VR application going forward with my research. So I want to elaborate on my research interest. So I study autobiographical memory or personal memory, but I'm also interested in stimulation of future events, so episodic future thinking. So the goal that I now have for my research idea is to create, let's say, a space that can prompt the good old days, or to prompt some life script event in the future, and to motivate people to make some kind of behavioral change. And then on the memory side, I also want to see whether or not VR can actually enhance episodic memory in older people, like general healthy older adults. But given that with my limited background in VR AR, so I'm working with engineers. So I experienced quite a few technical difficulties, and I questioned whether or not it is better with the technology or without having it. So I would like to hear more about your thoughts, and because we have many experienced researchers using VR and seemingly suggest that this is an exciting line of thinking that I'm encouraged. So yeah, basically just some reflection, basically.
For those, we heard several people say they've been doing this for 20 years. We'd like to hear your feedback on that question. Terry?
I think I was one of those 20 years people. I can weigh in. One of the things that I hear a lot, and I've been hearing for 20 years, is that VR can cause this and VR can influence that. And one thing that I caution young researchers about who are involved in this space is that VR doesn't actually do anything. It's how we use VR, and that we need to really understand what the capabilities and the features of VR are and how we can harness those to create meaningful outcomes. So that's the one area where I feel the most innovation is needed, is to be thinking about what specific affordances map to behavior change, cognitive outcomes, affective outcomes, and so on, and how we can design VR in such a way to effectively promote those types of outcomes.
Thanks. Terry, you wanted to say something? You're muted still, Terry.
Yeah, in regards to what the gentleman just said, I would have to disagree with you because I do think that VR is a really powerful medium for delivering some measurable medical outcomes. I'm involved with writing a book right now with Dr. Kathleen Benton. It's called VR for Serious Illness. And just citing the gate theory, right? Your brain puts up a neurological gate when you are in a deep immersion and you've stimulated the precortex version area of your brain puts up a neurological gate. And this has been proven with studies like Snow World in the 90s. So I do think that VR can be very powerful for delivering therapy. And I do agree it's important how we deliver it. The other thing I wanted to comment on is some fantastic research that I saw in a paper at Immersive Tech Week in Rotterdam last year. And it was a study coming out of, I think it's the University of Netherlands. And they were taking the data from MRIs and CT scans and using AI to convert that data into unique databases for 3D models of specific, this was a thoracic cavity that the surgeon needed a pre-visualization in VR. So rather than having to build separate databases for each patient, they were letting AI interpret the material coming out of the MRIs and forming that into a database. And that way a surgeon could fly through that and plan a surgery before ever going inside a patient.
Interesting. Barbara or Dan, I think you were other two long-term VR folks. You want to comment?
Yeah, and it might just be semantics, but I think of VR as a tool. So for example, if a provider's not trained in exposure therapy, I don't want them to get the VR and think that then they can do exposure therapy. So I do think of it as a tool. Going back to one of your earlier questions, Kathy, where do you think we can go or should go? I've been going for self-help, and especially with the head mount displays that can do a lot more on their own. And this is one of the ideas that I pinged Santiago and Morgan saying, yeah, I've got some ideas. So for example, I'll disclose, I'm not good at keeping them close to my chest. I have often thought that VR would be great for self-help, fear of public speaking. And fear of public speaking is the #1 fear in the United States. And thinking with this new beautiful building right on campus, because we get referred a lot of students and medical students and law students with the fear of public speaking, and thinking if we can develop a self-help program, basically they can come there, maybe with just a research assistant or something like that, and be able to get some help. So I think that there are a lot of different ways that we can go with some of this.
After 35 years of giving talks at many national societies, I would sign up for that.
Yeah. I can't and won't tell you when we did that VR study with the D-cycloserine for fear of public speaking, the maybe well-known people at Emory at the time who participated in the research. Yeah.
I wish you knew. Wilbur, did you want to say something?
No, just to exclaim that I think that's a beautiful idea, Barbara. We'd love to work with you on that, and I think Morgan just said that as well.
Thank you, Daniel, he's gone already. All right, we have just 10 minutes left, and usually in the last 10 minutes, what we do is just take a moment to discuss how this group might move forward together. Sometimes ideas emerge where people want to have a follow-up meeting and talk about specific projects. Sometimes it's enough just to meet others, and you'll have contact information for everyone who is here. You can follow up individually. We will ask you at some point in the future to tell us whether you developed any new collaborations as a result of this Blue Sky group. We're always trying to evaluate the programs that we do to see if they're useful, because we put time into this. We want to make sure people are getting something out of it. And so what are your thoughts about moving forward? What is the best way? It sounds like there's a lot of individual potential collaborations here, and people interested in Wilbur Center. So that may be just that giving you contact information is the best we can do, but tell us if there's something else that would be helpful.
Thanks, Kathy. I'll at least chime in and say your ideas were pretty much what Morgan and Santiago is thinking, that there's a lot of great individual projects, a lot of great experts here that we could all learn from. I could personally learn from. So maybe a more in-depth meeting with all of us, so we could specifically talk about projects and potential points of collaboration, and maybe we'll have it in our new. So we have a list of people we could reach out to you and establish that. But I'd love Morgan and Iago, any
one tactical thing and then a question for the group. The tactical thing is, if you want to come visit us or you want to start a collaboration or at least a conversation, you can email me at Santiago. That's we're very approachable. Happy to do that. I mean, on Zoom, or you can come see the space. The question for the group is, it sounded a little like people were excited to be and just to meet all the other people in the space, some who have known the space really well and some who haven't. I'm new to the space, coming from the mobile app side of things. Is there any interest in some kind of reoccurring, even just networking, collaborative kind of meeting, like even just in person here at Emory, or like a Zoom once a month, just to maybe have someone present on their work and get feedback, or just network with other people in VR? It just sounded like maybe there was an interest in that, just listening to everyone. So I wanted to put that out there and see if there was interest. Yeah. And if
Maybe
there's
if people
none,
are
that's okay
interested,
too.
you can raise your hand on the call, so we don't have to all chime in at once.
Or else just put your comments in the chat. We got one few people interested in that.
All right, a few interested. Okay.
I'm interested potentially whether I can attend or not. Send me the invites and I would love to attend if I can.
Sure, of course. Thanks. Thanks,
Yes.
Dr. Rothman.
So we have your emails from when you signed up for this, so we will share that with the group. And Morgan, I will leave that in your hands in terms of potentially following up with some sort of in-person. Did we lose Morgan? Oh,
No, I'm here.
oh, there you are. Sorry, I lost you.
I just wiggled on the screen. No,
lost
I'm
you.
happy to do that.
Yeah, we'll leave that part in your hands. Otherwise, we will just send out information, contact information, so you can interact with each other. Any last comments from any of our speakers today or others who participated? Remember, we have one person looking for a postdoc. We have another person who has students. Also a great way to interact in the future.
I'm excited to hear about everything going on that I wasn't aware of. So thank you for that. And I think it accomplished what the Blue Sky group is trying to accomplish. So I'm appreciative. Thank you.
And thank you to Barbara and Wilbur and team for sharing their experience and kind of getting us started down the road of this really exciting potential research area. So thank you for coming, and let us know if there's anything we can do. Don't forget about the pilot grants. If you do start a collaboration and you need a little bit to help you get started. Gray also put a link for an evaluation in the chat. If you could fill that out, it would be extremely helpful to us.
Yeah, just to add another note, I want to thank Kathy, Gray, and Lauren so much for putting this together. Morgan, Wilbur, I just had the idea that we wanted to help us boost the space, but really is all your work facilitating this event. So super, super appreciative to the three of you.
Happy to do it. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.